Hello, everyone. It is 2 a.m. Actually, 2:20. It's 2:20 now. I can't sleep. That is almost certainly because I am pregnant. As my pregnancies progress later and later into the trimesters, I stop being able to sleep at night, which is just it's just ducky. I have had 4 hours of sleep. I fell asleep really early, and I thought that was gonna, really help me because I really, really have been very sleep deprived lately. And after about 4 hours, I woke up and I was awake. Yay! I'm awake. And I figured since I'm probably not going to fall asleep again for the rest of the night, I might as well start working on a video. This is the one that's been kind of nagging at the back of my mind. It's been distracting me, so I'm just going to get this one out of the way. I don't know when I'm going to post it, but if it's filmed and it's done, then it's not cluttering up my head. It's been about 2 weeks since I figured out that I have ADHD. I have a video on that, so I'm not going to get into too many details. Let's not rehash it. Figured out I have ADHD. And in that time, I have, number one, not been sleeping very much. Part of that is because I've been staying up late reading everything I can about ADHD, but most of it is because I'm pregnant, because I wasn't sleeping very well before I figured that out either. In fact, that's kind of how I figured it out. I was awake at 2 a.m. and I couldn't sleep. Anyway, pregnancy, it's wonderful. It's so just it's such a joy of whatever. In the time since I figured out that I have ADHD, I've just been putting pieces together. And it's been interesting. It's definitely been interesting. It has not been a boring experience. I had all these little things in my life that never made sense. I had all these little mysteries. And from the time I was a very small child all the way up to now, there were all these little teeny things that never quite added up. They never quite made sense. And I was always looking at them and kind of scratching at them and picking at them because they it's almost itched. It's like, why don't you make any sense? Why don't you line up? Why is this the way it is? I developed this hobby for a while of looking up different psychological conditions, just trying to figure out what the hell was going on up here. Because I was like, maybe, who knows what's going on up here? Something's not quite right. Do I have early onset Alzheimer's? No. Okay. Do I have autism? No. Am I? What's going on? What's going on? Why am I like this? I'm not normal. Why am I like this? I've been doing that for years. In fact, one might say, has it been decades? Because I can count my life in decades now. Has it been decades? I think it's been decades. It's been decades. I've been trying to figure out why I'm so strange for decades because I knew there was something that just, it never quite lined up. And since I figured out that I have ADHD, and again, look at the other video. This isn't one of those like entirely like self-diagnostic kind of things like, oh, well, you know what? I looked up WebMD and now I have cancer. It's like I did get diagnosed. It was just I didn't believe the doctors when they diagnosed me. I was 10. Anyway, since I figured that out, things have been just rapidly falling into place every time I go back through the entire timeline of my life. So imagine winding back a film reel, because that's the picture that I always have in my head. It's like I go all the way back to the early beginning, and I start unraveling like all these little teeny mysteries. Everything starts clicking into place. This makes sense, this makes sense, this makes sense. And because these things were this way, all of a sudden this happened over here. And because this happened over here, these things make sense. And then my life makes a lot more sense to me these days, which is really, really cool. And I've really been enjoying it, but it's also really exhausting because I've been going back over everything. It's been good. It's been good. It's been fun. It's kept me busy because I need to have stuff to keep chewing on with my mind. Otherwise, I start to get bored and unhappy. And it's been I've actually had occasions, and this is a rare sort of thing for me, and it's always really pleasant in a way. I've had occasions where I've felt like my head was too full of new stuff and too full of new information. It's like somebody drove up to a library. We have a small town, so we've got this little dinky, cute like library. It's not like a huge grand library. It's more like one small, it's almost like the size of a gas station. Like it's a tiny library. And it's like somebody took an entire dump truck full of books, backed up to the library and just sort of dumped them out in front of the library. It's like, I know I've got shelving for all of this, but I've got to sort through all the books, and so I'm just sort of picking up random books like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting, and, oh, there's another one, that's interesting, too. Just, that's been the last 2 weeks for me, and it's been really cool, it's been really fun, it's been extremely exhausting. I was really hoping to get some sleep tonight. But I'm pregnant, so 2 a.m. is my morning. I wanted to talk about something because, and I don't really know how to categorize it. I don't know if I should say that this is a stripper thing or if this is an ADHD thing, because it's both. And so I don't know, I don't know what the title of this video is going to be, but there you go. I wanted to talk about some of the experiences I had becoming an exotic dancer. There are on-the-job annoyances you get with any job, and I've kind of accepted that. And when you become an exotic dancer, your on-the-job annoyances are typically things like, everyone around me is drunk, and why do they have to act so stupid all the time? Why does everyone treat me like I'm stupid? But that's not so much of a problem for me, because that was happening to me whether or not I was an exotic dancer to begin with. Everyone is constantly assuming that I'm some sort of prostitute, and occasionally I have to argue with my customers because I'm not a prostitute and I'm not going to do that thing you're asking me to do. Ever. And lastly, people are constantly trying to psychoanalyze you. Constantly. They assume you don't know nearly as much about the inside of your head as they know about the inside of your head, because you're a stripper. You're probably stupid. You're probably some sort of drug addict. You're probably some sort of slut. What the hell do you know? You don't know anything. You don't know anything, but they know things because they're smart, especially after a few beers. I had people constantly trying to figure out what was going on up here. And that might work for some folks if you're not a particularly introspective person. Me, I live up here. This is all I do all day long. There's something going on. If there's nothing going on, I am unhappy, I'm bored, and I'm grumpy, and I need something to fill up that empty space. I gotta have constant motion. And I've always been that way, and now I know why I'm that way. It's the ADHD. That's what ADHD does to a person. It makes you busy, and you got to stay busy. And that can be a really good thing or a really bad thing, depending on how you look at it, depending on how you use it, which is kind of what I'm making this video about. You think differently. If I'm constantly up here chewing away at things, the idea that I don't know what's going on, I mean, obviously there are things I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know I had ADHD, so that's a big, huge thing I didn't know was going on. But the idea that I haven't actually taken the time to think about things going on in my life, that's pretty laughable, because that's all I do. That's all I do. Everything else I do is sort of secondary. Did I wash the dishes today? Yeah, I washed the dishes today. Did I do the laundry today? Yeah, I did some laundry today. It's like, I drove the car today. Does any of that actually count nearly as much in my own head as all the things that I had going on up here while I was doing all those things? Not really. What am I going to remember? All the crap I did up here. Am I going to remember that I did the dishes? No. That's not important. The important thing is what's going on up here. So people are constantly trying to psychoanalyze me as an exotic dancer. I became an exotic dancer when I was about 21. Right after my 21st birthday. That was the first point at which I was legally eligible to become that, to do that. And so from the time I was 21 all the way up to the time that I am currently at 34, I've had people trying to psychoanalyze me. I've had customers trying to psychoanalyze me badly. Probably would have helped if they hadn't been quite so drunk when they tried. And I've had, of course, since I started making manosphere videos, I've had lots of men in the manosphere try to psychoanalyze me. One of the really funny things with everybody trying to psychoanalyze you is they always seem to take it back to your dad, which is really weird. I don't know if that's like a Freudian thing or what, but I was constantly getting guys telling me that it was something to do with my father, which is a little bit weird and edible for me personally. Like, I'm kind of like, okay, that's a little weird and edible. But they would always go back to, okay, well, you're an exotic dancer because you're trying to get even with your parents. You're an exotic dancer because daddy didn't love you. You must have daddy issues of some kind because you're an exotic dancer. It's like, I really don't think that's it, but you're not listening to me anyway because you assume I don't know anything about the inner workings of my mind. So I'm just going to have to listen to you trash talking my father, which is just... Can we change the subject and go to something that Something that's real? Let's try that. Something that's not imaginary. That's the usual conversation that I get from like customers in strip club. Red pill guys, they of course go back to the whole, well, Rollo said that, you should look at what a person does instead of what a person says. And that's good, but there's some issues with it that I think probably would be wise to address. My father, my actual father, not the weird Oedipal father that everyone seems to think I have, is a clinical psychologist. And I am not a clinical psychologist. I never took a psych class. Or actually, I did take a psych class, but I dropped out because I hated it a lot. It was really boring to me because I already knew everything. Yeah. Anyway, it was really boring to me. And that was one of the problems I had in college. He would occasionally talk about work. Like, we'd have these wonderful conversations, and sometimes he'd mention things like psychological concepts and things, and it was fascinating. And so, of course, I held on to and retained that information. Apparently, I retain information far better than I retain memories of events. I have no idea what I've done with my life the last 60 times I've washed the dishes, but I do remember the things that I was thinking while I was washing the dishes, which is not always helpful. He would occasionally mention things from his job, and that doesn't make me a qualified psychological professional. I'm not going to even pretend to entertain the illusion that it does. But one of the things I did learn very quickly is that somebody who's only had like a Psych 101 course really doesn't grasp the degree of nuance that is necessary to understand human psychology. And I've had so many people in my life who either haven't had any kind of psychology training or had, Psych 101, and they think they know everything. There was this one really funny girl. She was an exotic dancer, and she and I got into a bit of an argument with her boyfriend. Things got heated, possibly a little tiny bit violent. Anyway, I wasn't very nice to him. I think he had it coming. Anyway, she went around and told everyone that I had bipolar, which I think she meant borderline personality disorder, but those get confused really easily for me because I see the B and I see the P and I always mix them up. Always. It's very annoying to me. And so she went around and told everybody in the strip club that was my problem. And I knew that wasn't my problem because I've been trying to figure out what my problem is for years. Like, I'll go online and like read up for hours on any number of psychological ailments because I spent decades of my life trying to figure out just what the hell is wrong with me, because I got all these little things that don't quite add up and all these little ways I'm kind of weird and nothing makes sense, and I want to know why, and it's a mystery. And so of course it keeps my mind busy, and so I'll just keep chewing at it for forever. Well, I finally figured that out. It's ADHD, which is nice because everything makes sense now. It's like, okay, I can finally lay that one to rest. That's really nice. That's very, very soothing. But no, she was telling everybody that I had that. It's like, you don't, nothing about me suggests that. I suppose to an outside observer who doesn't know anything about me that you can jump to all sorts of really weird random conclusions, which people do, but that's not how my mind works at all. Like, it's not even close. So why would you go telling everyone that? Psych 101. She knew what she was talking about, right? So you take that, and that's one of the reasons that I try to be really forgiving of all my former customers who were like, oh, it must be daddy issues. It's like, oh, you must not have any idea what you're talking about. Bring it up to today. And I end up spending a lot of time talking with red pill guys, and of course they have this idea again. You look at what a person does, and that's more important than what they say. Let me give you a little bit of context for that statement. It's important in two ways. Number one, if you're not very socially graceful, which I'm not very socially graceful, you do have to look at a person's, you do kind of have to pick up clues from a person's behavior. And this is something that I struggled a lot with my social skills when I was younger, because apparently that's a very normal thing for an ADHD person. You do need to, if you're not socially very good, you have to consciously watch other people's behaviors and try to figure out what they're doing socially from their behavior, and it can really help smooth things out, because sometimes people say the polite things, but then their actions give them away. So for me, one of the best examples I have is the way everybody at my church treated me when I was a kid, because everybody treated me like I was some sort of freak, and I didn't know why. But then they would say these really nice Christian things to me, and so I'd be like, I don't know why I don't have any friends. Oh, honey, you have friends. I'm your friend. I don't know why I'm so weird. There's something different about me. I don't know what it is, and it's driving me nuts. This was me at like 16. I don't know why I'm so weird. There's something different about me. It's driving me nuts. Can you imagine? Like, I finally figured it out like 2 weeks ago. It's like having a little tiny explosion go off in your brain. It's really cool. But I would say this, and people would immediately, oh, honey, there's nothing weird about you. There's nothing wrong with you. You're normal. You're just like all the rest of us. Don't you worry. They'd say that. They say the words. And then they go right back to ignoring me, to avoiding me, to treating me like I was a freak. Like, their actions were speaking way louder than their words. And they weren't noticing this, but God, I was. Oh, honey, we like you. No, you don't. Oh, honey, you're normal. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Don't lie to me. I'm not that stupid. Went through a lot of that. That's one way to take Rola's advice. One of the two ways you can take Rola's advice, which is really, really helpful. It's like, okay, in a social situation, you can't always trust what a person's saying. If they're telling you something and it really doesn't feel right, that might be a point at which you want to watch their actions and see if their actions directly contradict their words. Important thing. Very good. Very good to know that. But then there's the other way of doing it, and this is the way that I see a lot of guys trying to do it, and it's like, you don't have the psychological know-how to do this properly. They look at it and they say, okay, women, because we're focusing on women, so women specifically, what they say is not equal to what they do. What they do is more important than what they say. We can just disregard everything that women say, because women don't actually know anything about what they're saying, especially when it comes to their sexuality, especially when it comes to their sexual behaviors. They don't know what they're saying, but what they do makes all the difference. And it's like, okay, well, what they're saying is still an important piece of the puzzle. Any clinician would understand that. I really like to hope any clinician would understand that. If I understand that, I really expect a clinician to understand that. When a person is doing therapy, and I mean, I had a therapist for a dad. This is something I've kind of pieced together and figured out. I'm not saying that I'm a professional. I'm not saying that I know anything, but what they're doing is they're talking to somebody. They're picking up information from that person. They're asking them questions to clarify, and they're getting an outside perspective on how that person is putting the world together. So you go into therapy and you have a problem, and you're telling your therapist about that problem, and you have one way of looking at the problem. You have this internalized way of looking at the problem, and you've been looking at the problem the same way for a really long time. Most likely, not always, but most likely you've been looking at it the same way for a long time, because you only have your own perspective. All you see is what you can see. When you have a therapist listening to you talking about all this stuff, number one, they're very psychologically trained, so they have an idea about all these other things that could be going on in your life which you might not be aware of, like ADHD, but I've tried therapy 3 times and nobody's ever picked it up. Anyway, they're looking at it with this kind of vast pool of knowledge, which is supposed to help them and give them, the ability to do a better job, but also they're an outside perspective. So they're going to make observations about you that you're not going to be able to make about yourself, because you're looking at it from a completely different angle. It's like if you're looking at one of those complex 3D pieces of artwork, and you're both standing in different points in the room, and you're looking at the same piece of artwork. One of you is going to see one thing, one of you is going to see another thing. And that extra perspective is going to be vastly helpful. And so when a therapist is giving therapy, they're asking you questions, they are going to be looking at your actions at things you're doing in therapy, your body language. They're also going to be looking at things that you've done and how those things that you've done add up. Not necessarily in the way that you say they do, but in the way that they add up in a more practical, external sense. So it is very, very useful if you're a clinician to understand. And I mean, I'm a layperson. I don't have all the finer details. I'm sure a clinician would be better to able to explain this. But when you're a clinician, you're looking at so much of what a person has done, and then you're measuring it against what they say. What I see men doing when they take the whole look at what women do and not what they say, let's just toss away everything that women say and look specifically at what they do, and then we'll just draw our own conclusions. That's not entirely helpful. It might be useful in a very broad kind of sense if you're looking for overarching patterns, and that's what Rollo Tomassi does. He looks at these overarching patterns of human behavior, and he writes these very fantastic and very interesting and quite possibly very accurate books on human behavior, which is why I read them. It's like, okay, these are the patterns that you're seeing. You've gone to a lot of time and a lot of effort to track these patterns, to notice these patterns, and to put these patterns into some semblance of order, which is fascinating, which is, again, why I read his books. But that's not the same as looking at an individual and saying, okay, I can disregard the things that you're saying about your life because, I can just look at what you do, and that's easy enough. Number one, you're probably not psychologically trained. You don't have the professional skills to be doing that in any meaningful kind of way. Number two, what a person says is also important. It's a piece of a puzzle. If you disregard one of the pieces of the puzzle, then you have missing pieces in your puzzles. You can't make the picture. Or at least you can't make an accurate picture. Which is one of the reasons that I'm all excited about finding out I have ADHD. It's like, this is the missing piece of so many puzzles in my life. So cool, yay! All of that becomes relevant when you look at my life, and because I was an exotic dancer, that for most men falls under the realm of sexuality. It's like, okay, this is a sex thing, so it's got to be about sex. And so when it comes to women and sex, disregard what she says, just look at what she does. And so, okay, so you've got that one little piece of information. I was an exotic dancer. What does that tell you? Well, honestly, it's only one piece of information, so it shouldn't tell you jack squat, but everybody thinks it does. Not everybody, but a lot of guys think it does. So you got a lot of guys who take that one little piece of information and then they start running with it. It's like, okay, you were an exotic dancer. Okay, you must have done this. You must have done that. You must be this. You must be that. You must be this other thing. I'm going to come to all these conclusions about you because it's a sex thing and I think I know what I'm talking about. It's very annoying. So again, with red pill guys, I don't get the weird Oedipal stuff about my dad as much, which is kind of nice because that's weird and a little bit freaky, and thank you for not doing that. But at the same time, I get a bunch of other stuff like, well, you don't actually know about your own sexuality. You don't actually know what you're talking about. You might say that exotic dance was good for you, but it wasn't really. That's just what you're saying, and what you're saying isn't as important. Now, there's a little bit of precedent for this. There are a lot of women in the world who will go out and they'll start talking about how doing this crazy sexual thing was good for me. And the most recent example was, of course, the pastor. She gave one sermon. I don't really know why everybody calls her a pastor, but she calls her a pastor. It's like, I guess it adds to the drama of the whole thing, and so it gets her more attention. Who became an OnlyFans girl, and she said it was so sexually healing. And I read articles about it, and it's like she keeps talking about how sexually healing it is, but she can't quite figure out why it was healing or anything like that. She just felt like something was missing in her life and went out and did this wild and crazy thing. And it's like, okay, how am I supposed to not assume that you just felt a little bored being a housewife and you needed some adventure in your life and you generated that, and so now you're all happy and you've completely caused havoc in your husband's and your children's lives. But okay, whatever. I understand there are a lot of women out there who do crazy, stupid sexual stuff, and then they say, but it was so healing. And so there is a precedent for it where guys will look at it and be like, oh, you're one of those women. No, no, not always. Not always. That's not how it always works. And I keep having to explain this to people because I have this very stupid idea that if I explain something clearly enough, people are going to be capable of understanding it. And I keep forgetting that people are way more attached to their own prejudices than they are to the truth, which is annoying, honestly. Here's what my life was like when I became an exotic dancer. First of all, I did really, really badly in school. Couldn't figure out why. It was just one of those little mysteries. A lot of those little mysteries in my life. Then I went to college, did really, really badly in college. That was also one of those just, I hated it because it was exactly like high school and I was hoping for so much more. Like I'd always been told that college would be intellectually stimulating and I couldn't wait to get there, and then I got there and it was high school all over again. Only everybody was older than me, and they all went to the bar and drunk and socialized with each other. And I was too young to go to the bar and drink and socialize with everybody else, so I had to stay home. I dropped out of college pretty quickly, and I had jobs during college, but I decided to get a different job. I switched over to working in a nursing home. And I started out working in the dietary department as a dietary aide, and then eventually I got my CNA license and moved over and became a CNA, a nurse's assistant, a certified nurse's assistant. That's what that stands for. And then from there, I got my EMT license, EMT basic, and then I got a job working on an ambulance, and I did that for a while. Which a lot of people don't believe that a stripper can also work on an ambulance, but guess what? These things happen. So let me tell you about this slice of my job history, just to give you a picture of what my life was like. First of all, I was really excited to have jobs, like actual jobs, because actual jobs were not nearly as hard as everyone told me they would be. I thought actual jobs would be like my public school experience, where they're asking you to do things that put your life in danger, and if you don't do them as well as they think you should be doing them, then they scold you for not doing a good enough job or working hard enough. Because I had asthma on top of everything else, and so if I ran a mile, I would need an ambulance to come pick me up. That never happened. And on top of that, I would get scolded for not trying hard enough. So I'd be lying there on the ground, and somebody would walk up and look down at me like, well, maybe if you try a little harder next time, you'll actually be able to do something with this. I'm lying on the ground. I'm not breathing very well. I'm making these weird raspy things, and I've got fluids draining out of my face. Maybe you might want to, like, get me some damn help or something. Anyway, that was high school. That was public school, actually. It was elementary school, middle school, high school. It was hell. And then I got a job, and they weren't asking me to do things that could potentially kill me. And I was like, this is really great. Everybody said this would be hard, but you know what? This is really great. That didn't mean that I was stellar at any of my jobs. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I was not stellar at any of my jobs. Working in the dietary department, it wasn't very long before my boss pulled me aside and said, you know what? Maybe you want to come in a little bit early to get your work done. And I looked and I was like, okay, so you want me to come in and clock in early? She's like, well, no, actually I don't. But if you come in early and you start working and then you clock in when it's time for you to clock in, maybe you'll be able to do your job. Because I had a set amount of stuff I was supposed to do. And so I looked at it, I was like, okay. I was very young, I was very naive, I was very dumb. And honestly, I'd never had anyone advocate for me. So I never had anyone stand up for me and be like, hey, she deserves better treatment than this. Because let's be honest, if somebody had done that, my life would be vastly different. I came into work half an hour early, and I started working, and I worked for half an hour, and then I would clock into my job, and I would do my job. My shift would end, everybody would go home, because after dinner, once we cleaned up the dishes and everything, everybody would go home. And I would clock out when everybody else clocked out, and then I would continue to work until my job was done, until my section of the work had been completed. And I did that every single day I worked in the dietary department. I'd come in half an hour early, I'd work half an hour for free, and then at the end of the day I'd clock out, and I'd work at least half an hour additionally, sometimes more like 45 minutes, sometimes an additional hour. Didn't matter. I just keep working until the job was done. For free. No pay for all that time. First of all, that's illegal. Don't make people work for free. For what the hell? But it was a crappy company, so I did that every single day of work. And I remember one night I had been working a bunch of shifts, and I broke down crying after I got home because I'd worked like 2 extra hours that day for free, no pay. And I just couldn't understand, because it had been months and months and months that this had been going on. I couldn't understand why I wasn't getting any better. Because you'd think that with repetition you learn things, because that's how most people work. Okay, you're a little slow at this, don't worry. Just put in a little bit of extra time, and then eventually you'll pick it up, and then you'll be as fast as everybody else. Maybe that works for a neurotypical brain, but I've never had a neurotypical brain. And I didn't realize that. Nobody realized that. And so I was working all this extra time, all this extra effort, and I was still just as slow as when I started out. I was still just as bad at my job on the 100th day I'd been doing my job as I was on the very first day I did my job. Maybe the second. The first day you don't know anything. So anyway, you would think that I would get some sort of, like, if any of you have the very naive idea that I was getting any kind of extra recognition or any kind of extra acknowledgement for all this extra work that I was doing to try and keep up with everybody else, like really putting in that hard, solid effort, you would be so mistaken. You'd be so wrong. That's not how reality works. My coworkers resented me because I wasn't moving as fast as they were. My boss resented me because I wasn't as fast as my coworkers were, so clearly I wasn't working as hard as they were. And I resented my job because everybody hated me, and I was working all this extra time for free, so I'm putting in all this extra energy and all this extra effort, and I don't have anything to show for it. And that's kind of why I want to make this video. That's what ADHD looks like. If you give an ADHD person the wrong task, if you give them something to do, because ADHD people are not neurotypical, and so they don't work the way you expect them to work if you're a neurotypical person. You have a nice little box that you operate in, and you understand how that operating system works. There's nothing wrong with that operating system. It is the most common operating system, and so everything makes sense to you. The world was built around that operating system. ADHD person is operating on a different system. You ask them to do something that's normal for you, it might not be something that they're going to be good at. And so they'll seem extraordinarily bad at it, to the degree that you are going to very likely assume that it's intentional. Nobody is that bad at something, right? If it's an ADHD person, of course it is, because they're working on a different operating system. Whole different set of rules with ADHD. Just saying, in case you're trying to figure that out. The problem, I think, with that job for a very long time was that they were asking me to do things that I had no good abilities in. Anyway, after I did the dietary department, I got my nurse's aide. I went over and I started working as a nurse's aide. Same problem. They didn't make me clock in early or late and work for extra time, which was really nice, but all my coworkers hated me. My bosses really didn't like me because I was never doing things as fast as everybody else, because I was constantly forgetting things, because when you're a nurse's aide, you're constantly doing a bunch of stuff that requires the use of your short-term memory. My short-term memory isn't always the most reliable. And so I was constantly forgetting what I was doing midway through tasks. I was constantly messing up. I was constantly making little mistakes. Not like bad mistakes, like if you're a nurse's aide, you can really screw someone's life up by making mistakes. I wasn't making those mistakes, but I'd make mistakes like I'd walk into a room because I needed to give somebody a toothbrush, and then I'd realize that midway through going back the other way to get them a toothbrush, I'd gotten distracted and gotten something for someone else, and then I'd gone back to their room to get them a toothbrush, and I hadn't gotten their toothbrush. And so then I need to go back all the way over to get the toothbrush and bring it to that person, because they needed a toothbrush. And in that time, I'm running up and down the hall. I'm not getting things done. I'm not working as efficiently as other people. And that nursing home in particular, but really any nursing home, they've got you so shaved down to the second and the minute that, like, literally they would give us a 15-minute block of time to get every single person ready. And if you're not making the most of that 15 minutes, it's going to drag you down, and it's going to drag everyone else on your team down. Imagine working with someone like that. They hated me there, and I can't even blame them for hating me. I hated me. It was miserable. So then I got my EMT license, and I got a job on an ambulance. And that should have been a very good idea. That should have been a really good fit. ADHD people, not all ADHD people. You can't just slap the same label on everybody with ADHD. There's different types of ADHD, and there's different personal preferences. If you have ADHD and you can't stand the sight of blood, working on an ambulance might not be the best idea for you. But for me, with ADHD, and for many people with ADHD, emergency services is the way to go. You have some downtime, and then something happens, and you got to snap to attention, and you got to get moving, and you got to focus, and everything goes into hyperfocus. You have an emergency, so you have a sense of urgency, which generates a sense of hyperfocus. So suddenly you're going into a situation, and there's all this new information that you got to take in, and you're taking in information everywhere. Who's the patient? How old is the patient? What gender is the patient? What's the patient's medical history? Does the patient have any allergies? Is the patient on any medication? All of this really, really fast, really fast. The sooner you can get it, the better. Information, information, information. We're really good at that. Like that's something we're good at. I finally had a job doing something that I was good at, that my brain was designed to do. You know, asking me to do dishes and set up table trays. It's kind of dull. It's kind of redundant. It's very mentally unstimulating. I'm not trying to be a special snowflake here, but if you're someone like me, you're not gonna be good at that. And I wasn't, which is why I was working an extra half hour before my shift and an extra half hour to an hour after my shift every single day, because I just couldn't make it work. Stick me in an emergency, and all of a sudden it's like, I can focus. This is wonderful. Let's get the job done. Oh, you're bleeding. Okay, let's fix that for you. It was a really, really, really good match. The problem was it was a rural ambulance. It was a very rural ambulance because I grew up in a really rural part of the world, part of the country. We didn't get called out on runs. And I would wait. I'd clock into my shift and I'd just wait. Hour after hour after hour. Like, okay, I'm ready to do something. I'm ready to get going. Can somebody please like fall down and break their leg or something so that I just have something to do? I didn't do well in that job. Like, as weird as it sounds and as good of a fit as it was, like, it was a wise decision on my part to pick that, because I was finally starting to find jobs that matched my thinking pattern. And that was a good choice for me. But we never got to do anything. And so I spent like almost a year on the job. And I went on a handful of runs. Like, it was just so... I went on more than a handful, but they were just... Nothing ever happened. Nothing happened. It was a long, long exercise in boredom. And I fell into a depression because I had moved 2 hours down the highway in order to work at this specific ambulance company because they were the only ones that had a job opening at the time. And I was really, really, really eager to get that job as soon as possible. And so I uprooted everything. I moved over to this really unbelievably crappy trailer in the middle of this wheat field in the middle of nowhere. I don't know if I've talked about it a little bit in some of the videos that I made. There wasn't actually a lock on the door. There wasn't even a latch on the door. So the front door would blow open in the wind because the wind would it would come hurtling across the prairie. There was nothing to stop it. And so it would just slam into the trailer and the door would blow open and the snow would go blowing in and the cats would go running out because I had cats, of course. And so I'd have to get up from whatever I was doing and run outside into the snow barefoot and grab the cats so that they could herd them all back into the house and then slam the door shut. And I ended up with like piles of random junk from around my trailer, from around my home, piled up in front of the door because the door wouldn't stay closed because the wind would just blow it right open. And so just random piles of junk, and there was no way to lock it from the inside, so anybody could have come in the entire like time that I was living there and just, you know, they could have come in, they could have robbed the place, not that I had any possessions of value. They could have done any number of heinous things to me. There was a girl just 5 minutes down the road from me who got beaten to death with a baseball bat, and it was kind of like, wow, and I can't even lock my door. It was not great living conditions. And I didn't know anybody in that small town, and I had serious social problems, like serious social problems. And that's actually a very common thing with ADHD. I never knew, but there you go. Which is not to say that people with ADHD are going to be weird. It's just we tend to lag developmentally, socially, behind our our peers in our age group. And so I was a little bit behind when I started out. 2 to 5 years. Some people say 2 to 3 years. Some people say 3 to 5 years. So we'll say 2 to 5 years behind. And then of course, if you're gifted, because that's also a problem, you're going to be academically 3 to 5 years ahead of your peers. And so you've got this huge mismatch. And it was a real problem when I was a kid, and it tends to spiral out of control. If you don't learn the social skills, people start to ostracize you. If people start to ostracize you, then you don't learn the social skills, and it just keeps getting worse. So I didn't feel comfortable socially with anybody. Different people handle those sorts of problems in different ways. There's a lot of people with ADHD who become people pleasers because they're really they're trying to make things work, and it's hard, and so they're really, really trying, which is not good. And my solution was, I think, in some ways worse, but there you go. I just stopped talking to people. I just started avoiding people. I didn't socialize with anyone. I didn't have friends. I didn't go out anywhere. I just gave up on it. It was like, okay, this isn't working. I'd sit at home in my shitty, shitty little trailer, and I'd think, God, I'd love to have a friend. I thought about what that might be like, but I couldn't actually imagine it happening in reality. For years, that was my life. I turned 21. I became an exotic dancer. I had no idea how good that would be for me. And this is where you have that mismatch of, well, listen to what women do and not what they say. Well, you don't know what I did when I became an exotic dancer. You just know the job title. You don't know jack shit. You don't. Here's what I noticed when I became an exotic dancer. My depression went away. I learned how to talk to people. I started practicing socialization, which was something I was really, really bad at. And I practiced it because I wanted to have a friend one day. I wanted to be able to have friends. I wanted to be able to connect with people, with other human beings, because human beings are social, whether we want to admit it or not. So I practiced it every single day when I went into work. And it was the perfect environment for me to practice it in, because nobody knew that I was that freaky, weird girl that everybody hated. Nobody knew anything about me. And on top of that, I had a pair of huge, bouncing, buoyant boobs to kind of smooth things along socially. It gave me a chance to constantly try new conversations. You get into a conversation with a customer, you say something really awkward and stupid, they're uncomfortable, you're uncomfortable, you excuse yourself, you get up and you walk to a different customer. You sit down, you start talking with them. You figure out how to have conversations with people. Small talk was never a skill of mine. I was always very bad at small talk. I learned how to make small talk in a strip club. You gotta learn it somewhere. Is it really, really embarrassing and humiliating that I, as a 21-year-old, had to learn how to do small talk, like basic beginner social things, in a strip club as an adult? Yeah, it was humiliating. It was absolutely humiliating. The alternative was going back to my crappy trailer and trying to live there all by myself without anybody to talk to, which will drive a person insane given enough time. It will. So my depression went away. I was learning the social skills that I very badly needed to learn. My health improved because my health got completely trashed in high school because, well, in public school, it wasn't just high school, it was all throughout public school. My health got trashed because people kept trying to do things, like they kept trying to get me to do things that were very bad for my lungs. And so I just got sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker, and nobody could figure out why. And everybody's solution was just like, give her more drugs, that'll fix everything. No. How about you stop making me do the things that are making me sick, and then maybe I'll be able to function like a normal person. But no. We need to just solve it with drugs. Everything needs to get solved with drugs. There's no alternative methods. Just pile on the medication there. My health started improving when I finally became a stripper. Like, I finally, for the first time in my life, I was healthy. These things I already knew. The things I didn't know relate to ADHD. When you have ADHD, your brain is naturally running a little bit short of dopamine and norepinephrine, and I think dopa, but I'm not so sure about dopa. You need certain chemicals, and those chemicals aren't necessarily processing the way they should, which is why a hit of dopamine for an ADHD person is kind of like, whoa, I'm ready to go. What are we doing? This is cool. This is how we hyperfocus. This is why we hyperfocus. Something we're doing is giving us that little bit of dopamine or norepinephrine or whatever, and all of a sudden it's like, I want it, I want it, I want it, I want it. I could do this for hours. I could do this for days. I could just keep doing this. This is awesome. Anything that gives you the chemicals you need, all of a sudden everything lights up and it's like, I want to keep doing this forever. I do believe, and I could be wrong, I haven't spent that much time reading about how dopamine works inside the brain. I'm not that well educated, guys. I have a high school diploma. But apparently dopamine isn't necessarily the thing that gives you the reward. It's the thing that tells you, you got a reward here. And so you remember to do the behavior again. And so dopamine plays into addiction. I'm not so clear on how all that works yet, but I thought it was interesting. Anyway, exercise. Exercise gives you dopamine and norepinephrine. And that's what I needed. And so I'd get up on stage and I'd start dancing, and I'd be getting these chemicals going through my brain that I desperately needed and wanted. And everything would, you might be thinking, okay, so basically you were a drug addict. It's like, well, no, not exactly. The ADHD brain runs deficient on these things. Like, it's not processing them correctly, so it doesn't have enough of them. And when you suddenly give those things to the brain, all of a sudden it focuses and everything falls into line, and all of a sudden you can see a little more clearly. And that's what it was like for me. I started dancing and I felt more focused. I felt more together. And when I started pole dancing, then it really, really started lighting up. And I remember I would get off stage after I had done a set, and I'd be physically very exhausted, and I felt like someone had gone into my mind and they'd straightened and tidied everything inside my head for me. And I felt so clean, and I felt so like everything had just been washed out and tidied and cleared up and made so much nicer and cleaner and more pleasant inside my own head. And I couldn't figure out why that was. I just figured exercise is great for people. This is good. I had no idea that that was my reaction to the chemicals that were being released when I was exerting myself physically, in this case pole dancing. And so I was having all sorts of chemical reactions to that normal people don't necessarily have, and they were all really, really beneficial. They were really good for me. How much of my depression clearing up was the fact that I was actually getting out of the house, and I was actually talking to people, and I was actually, not sitting in a crappy trailer where the wind could blow the door open because it didn't latch shut or lock. How much of it was the fact that I was no longer in those depressing settings, and how much of it was the fact that chemically things were finally being balanced out? I don't know. A little bit of both. It was really awesome. It was really good for me. It was really good for me. So I'm suddenly, as time passes, I'm suddenly being able to have positive social interactions with people, which is not something I was able to do before. I'm starting to make friends. Like, by the second year of my being a dancer, I started making friends, and I had friends now, it was very different for me. It had been a long time since I'd had friends, and so it was nice. I was a little wary of it. It was like, okay, don't know what to do with this, but here we go. So I had friends, positive social interactions with people. I'm getting exercise, which is generally healthy for you. My body felt stronger. My body was visibly changed, considerably visibly altered, actually. Like, I looked radically different after I started dancing than before I started dancing. Because before I was dancing, I'd try to exercise, but I didn't really know how to exercise. And I kept trying to do the things my gym teachers kept telling me to do, which was not healthy for me. And so I wasn't like super pudgy. I weigh more now that I'm pregnant than I did then. But, I was a little, actually, you know what? I am pregnant right now. And so I'm probably a little rounder in the face than normal. You might be able to see that. I'm definitely rounder in the middle than normal. My thighs are a little bigger than normal. Like, everything's just a little bit bigger. That went away. All of a sudden, I had muscle tone. All of a sudden, I had some pretty damn nice abs. I looked physically radically different after becoming an exotic dancer and dancing for a while. That's healthy. Like, I didn't have the six pack. I had the nice like 11 line kind of thing going on. That's healthy. It's healthy to be healthy. My body felt better. I was able to move around more easily. I felt better physically. Just I felt better. But then also mentally. The change was it was so beautiful. Like, beautiful is the word I would use to describe it. It wasn't even, oh, there was a significant change in my overall like mental like ability to think. No, it was beautiful. Everything was just so nice all of a sudden. I felt so good. you know? Everything was so much cleaner, and everything was so much less tangled and messy and disorganized, and I felt so much better. And I knew that what I was doing when I was dancing was good for me. I had no idea why. And I was trying to figure it out. It was another one of those little mysteries that I would puzzle over through the years. Like, how come dancing was so good for me? Like, what was it? What was it about that? And I was trying. I was trying to fit in every single different idea that I could. It was like, well, maybe it was all the trauma of the things that I went through in public school, like all those repeated asthma attacks and all of the, the trauma of that. Because I mean, they were technically traumatic. I mean, I did nearly die one time. I got stuck in the ER another time. I was bedridden for a full week. I couldn't breathe. I was in a semi-conscious state. It was not good. That would be traumatic for anybody. So, I mean, I was a little kid, so you can safely assume that was probably traumatic, right? That was traumatizing. There was that period of time, like throughout my entire public school education, so I guess it was a long period of time, where I really didn't think that I was a human being. Because if you were a human being, nobody would let a human being go through the things I went through. Nobody would let a human being experience what I was being forced to experience. Like, you don't do that to a human. You do that to someone subhuman. You do that to an animal. You don't treat a person like that. So the way I was being treated in school, I mean, I always thought that maybe because you color things with emotion over time as you remember them, I always thought maybe I was remembering these things in a very exaggerated way. Like, there's always that possibility that it wasn't really that bad, because I remember it being so bad. Maybe I'm just remembering it a little bit more dramatically than real, maybe, just maybe. And then I had kids, and it was like, what if your kids goes through something like you went through? Like, what if your kids has to face what you faced? Oh, hell no. I will kill people. I will straight up murder somebody before I let one of my kids go through what I went through. It's like, well, that clears that up. I wasn't pretty sure I wasn't just remembering things with extra coloring. I mean, I've worked really, really, really hard to be as accurate in my memory of things as possible, which I understand everybody colors things with emotions, but if you just look at the bare facts, and these are things that other people were there to observe. By the way, have I mentioned that people are constantly questioning my credibility and my sanity and stuff, so that's an issue. The problem isn't that I'm not sane. The problem is that the circumstances I endured were unusual and extraordinary enough that people just don't believe me. So I have to go back and I have to ask people who were there, did this really happen? Yeah, it really happened. It really happened. There were other people there. They didn't necessarily always know, but they knew some of the details, little bits. They knew enough. It's real. My life is real. I thought maybe the trauma from all of that was being somehow remedied by me being a pole dancer, like doing these very, very strenuous activities. Maybe it was helping me to somehow relive or reenact the trauma of all these other strenuous activities that were extremely damaging and unsafe for me. Maybe this was giving me a sense of control over my own body. And honestly, that's entirely possible, because I did gain a much greater sense of control and self-ownership after I became an exotic dancer, because I was exercising and I was doing all this stuff. And when you're pole dancing, when you're dangling yourself upside down in midair, you you have to focus very, very, very hard on what you're doing, or you're going to drop yourself and you're going to fall on the ground and break your neck. And in those moments, I had to be connected to my body. Like, I had spent so many years of my life disconnecting myself from my body. Like, okay, I'm this brain that's up here, and all of this wreckage that is my body, well, I don't want to be associated with that because it's all broken. When I became an exotic dancer, suddenly I wasn't broken anymore. And I came to this point where I was much more connected to my body. I had much more, I felt less horrible about my body. I became less detached from my body. I grew this sense of ownership of my body. If you want to know what I'm talking about, just look up like the psychology of rape victims, and that'll give you a bit of an idea. I wasn't raped until like right before I became an exotic dancer, and by that point I was so messed up in the head, like getting raped wasn't that unusual of a thing. Like, it was one of those things like, oh well, and that happened too. It didn't really bother me because I was already, I had already been through so much. Anyway, I finally started building this much healthier relationship with myself as a physical entity when I became a dancer. And so I kept on thinking for the longest time, that's what's going on. That explains it. That explains why I think it's beneficial. That explains why I think it's good. I was completely unaware of the ADHD aspect of things. The chemical changes that were going on in my brain, the way those chemical changes were improving my ability to concentrate, my ability to feel normal, to feel good and healthy. You might be looking at it and saying, well, you became an exotic dancer. That's some sort of, some sort of what's the word everybody's always using? Some sort of sexual deviance on your part, some sort of sexual sin you've committed that you want people to forgive you for. So you're going to say it was a good thing in order to make people forgive you for your errors in judgment or whatever. No. I'm sorry, but no. I finally did something that worked, and it fixed me because I was very, very broken. You have no idea. The exotic dance job environment is one of those job environments that is surprisingly ADHD friendly. Namely, this is because so many people who are attracted to the job are also drug addicts and can't be relied upon to do anything in that nice set in the box kind of order that people tend to expect you to do on the job. Are you showing up for work today? No? Yes? Whatever. Are you coming in at any particular time today? Okay. Well, if we see you, we see you, and if you're in an hour late, well, whatever. No one expects things from an exotic dancer, which means that there's not a lot of limitations on your behavior, which means that you have basically a free rein to do whatever, which can be really, really good for someone with ADHD. It can be really, really bad for someone with ADHD. If you give someone with an ADHD a job and say, you know what, show up when you show up, do what you do, and, we'll just see what happens. That can be really, really bad if the thing you're doing is really boring and mundane, like working in the dietary department. That would be a bad situation. But if it's something like dancing, which helps you to regulate your brain chemistry, and if it helps you to hyperfocus, and if it's enjoyable, all of a sudden, I'm in the moment the club opens. I'm there until closing, and then the next day I'm going to be there. And I actually had to take a month off of work at one point because I gave myself tendinitis in both shoulders and both elbows because I was dancing so much. One does not simply get tendinitis in both shoulders and both elbows simultaneously. No. I got tendinitis in my shoulder and I kept dancing. And then I got tendinitis in my other shoulder and I kept dancing. And I just ignored the pain because it just felt so good to be dancing. And you might be thinking, okay, well, you were enjoying the stage and the attention and all that. No, my friends. I came in before anybody else came in. I came in when they were first opening the club, when they hadn't turned on the music, when they hadn't put the lights down low, when the little, glittery stroby things weren't on yet. I came in when it was still, they were still just opening the place and setting out the stuff, and they hadn't even let the customers in yet. And the first thing thing I always asked was, hey, is it okay if I go up on stage and practice a little bit? And they were like, sure. And I was like, because I mean, strip club, do whatever, you know? Do whatever? All right, I will. I'd go up on stage. I would dance and dance and dance and dance and dance until there was kind of like time for me to get down so that they could start calling girls up to do their sets. And usually I was the first girl they called up because I was already on the stage. There weren't any people watching me. Nobody cared what I was doing. I just danced because I absolutely had to dance as much as possible. I ignored the pain of the tendonitis in my shoulder, and then the pain of the tendonitis in my other shoulder. And then I started getting tendonitis in my elbows. And at that point, it was getting really, really difficult to do pole tricks because you actually need your arms in order to hold on to the pole. And if both of your arms stop working in multiple joints, eventually you get to a point where it's like, okay, I'm in excruciating pain. I can't lift my arms anymore. And every time I get off stage, I realize that I've probably not done a good thing. So I finally took a month off work. I didn't tell anybody about it. I went home. I didn't take any pain pills. I knew it was tendonitis. I didn't go to a doctor because I really didn't trust doctors at that point, which, given my medical history, you wouldn't trust a doctor either. And so I got a hot pack, and I was pressing the hot pack against my joints. But I only had, I had to hold the hot pack with one hand and then press against the joints with the other. So I was switching the hot pack back and forth from one hand to the other, like stick it against this joint. Okay, there's a little bit of relief. Okay, now this one's really hurting. Okay, stick it against this joint. Okay, whew, a little bit of relief there. Oh, now this one's hurting. Stick it against this joint. I was gone for a month. I came back and nobody said anything. It was just like, oh, there you are. It's a free-form kind of environment. And for me, that was what I needed. Different people with different kinds of ADHD and different symptom severities are going to experience things differently. You got to find something that works for you. If you don't like dancing, this is not the job for you. In fact, generally speaking, for most people, this is not the job for you. I'm pretty sure most folks would be horrified to find out that I got the job and kept the job for as long as I did, because it meshed well with my ADHD. It's like, any parent who finds this and sees this video, I'm sure they're just going to be absolutely terrified. Like, oh my God, my kid, my darling child is going to become an exotic dancer? That's awful. It's like, well, I didn't have any better options. Like, number one, a lot of things went very, very, very wrong in my life before I got to that point. If you are a parent and you are watching this and you are terrified for your child, advocate for your kid. Just try that. I know it might not be easy. Advocate for your kid. I remember one instance of my parents ever advocating for me to my teachers. One. Only one. My parents weren't trying to be bad parents. They believed the teachers when the teachers told them, she's unmotivated, she's rebellious, she's defiant, she doesn't want to work hard. She's got the ability, she just doesn't want to use it. They believed my teachers when my teachers said that. And so that's just what they went with. They never questioned it. They never challenged it. It doesn't mean they were bad parents. It just means they screwed up really badly in that particular area. They did a lot of things right. They modeled relationships really, really wonderfully to me. Like, partnerships, marital relationships. They're a wonderful model. They're the sweetest people. They've been very loyal to each other. Because they made that model for me when I was a little girl, I grew up and I have a very successful, happy marriage because I saw it growing up and I had that behavior modeled for me. Humans grow up mimicking the behaviors that they see their caretakers modeling for them. And my parents modeled a lot of really good and healthy behaviors, but one way in which they definitely screwed up, they did not advocate for me. So if you are a parent and you're sitting there going, I don't want my little daughter to grow up to become an exotic dancer, I don't ever want her to grow up to be a stripper, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Advocate for your kid. Don't just leave them hanging high and dry in a world that is definitely not built for them or designed for them, if they have ADHD, and expect them to just flourish because that's what kids do, They find a way. Yeah, the other kids are picking on them. Yeah, their teachers are treating them like dirt. Yeah, their employers are trying to manipulate and use them and treating them horribly. Yeah, everyone in their life is treating them awful. But, they're kids. They'll thrive. They'll find a way. We do find a way sometimes, Sometimes we do find a way. It's just not the way you want. It's not the way you like. And I mean, it's not like I wasn't making the right steps and making the right decisions. Getting a job on an ambulance, very good decision, especially for someone like me with ADHD, especially with my kind of brain profile. Perfect job for me. It just didn't work out because we were in the middle of nowhere and I never got any jobs. Like, I never got any work. So nothing ever happened. Anyway, it's been over an hour now, so I probably should start winding it up. I just want to mention some other quick benefits that I experienced when I became an exotic dancer. Not only was the job setup of being an exotic dancer, you come when you want to come, you leave when you want to leave. While you're at work, you do whatever the hell you want to do. If you want to talk to customers, talk to customers. If you want to go practice on the stage, go practice on the stage. If you don't like one of the customers, then, go talk to a different customer. No one's going to tell you what to do. No one tells you what to do. You have completely free form to just do your job. That was a really great setup for me. Like, I loved that. And I was able to really mesh well with that and do that for, 8 years. It was really funny because I see so many people, particularly millennials, they're like, I want to have a job where I feel fulfilled. I had that. I had a job that I loved. I had a job where I felt fulfilled. I had a job where, I was happy. I was content. I don't care if anybody else didn't like it. And nobody else seemed to like it. Everybody else had a problem with it. My parents had a problem with it. My boyfriend got me raped by his friend because he was trying to convince me not to become an exotic dancer. He had a problem with it. So many people had a problem with it. I was happy. I was able to function in a way that I had never been able to function before, at a level that I had never been able to function before. I didn't care what other people thought. I just wanted to continue to survive. And this is where we get into the last point at which I've got to say it was really, really good for me to become an exotic dancer, because when I was working on the ambulance, I was struggling with, I won't say that I was suicidal. I won't say that I was suicidal because I wasn't getting to the point where I was like, well, I have some razor blades. I wasn't there yet, but I was doing increasingly destructive things and I knew where it was all going. And when I say increasingly destructive things, I wasn't like doing drugs. I wasn't like going out and partying because I couldn't go out and party. I didn't have anyone to go out and party with. I didn't begin to know how to do any of that stuff. I didn't have access to any drugs, and I hated drugs anyway, so that wasn't a problem. My problem was I was doing things that were dangerous for me. I got so fed up working on the ambulance, I was like, there's got to be something else I can do. There's got to be some way out of here. And the only avenue I hadn't tried at that point was joining the military, because my body was too messed up to join the military. And it was like, well, I've got to get through basic, and in order to get through basic, I got to be able to run. And I can't run. I've never been able to run because every time I try, I get an asthma attack. But there's nothing else I can do, so I'll try it. And so I started running. That's bad for me. Like, if I run, I get an asthma attack. It's that simple. So I would wait until it was dark outside, and I would drive out to a lonely highway in the middle of a bunch of wheat fields in somewhere where no one would be able to find me, because I didn't want people to see me when I was having an asthma attack. I was very comfortable with the idea of dying. That wasn't a problem because I'd already had at least one near-death experience. I just didn't want to have to deal with the social stress of other people seeing me when I was in the middle of an asthma attack, because nobody had ever been sympathetic to me when I was having an asthma attack. Ever. And honestly, no one ever has. Ever. And so I was out there in the middle of nowhere on the side of the highway, and I would run up and down the side of the highway, and I was trying to use magic to improve my ability to run. Like, if I can just magically make myself run well enough, then I can join the military and maybe I can get out of this place, because I hate everything and I wish my life was over. I made myself extremely sick doing that. I could have killed myself doing that. And I knew it. I knew that I could have killed myself, and I didn't care. And I would have, if things got out of control, because asthma is one of those things where you have an acute attack. If you have an acute attack, then things get out of control very easily and very quickly. I was on the side of the highway alone in the middle of nowhere. I didn't have a cell phone. There was no one to call for help, and there was no way to call for help. And I didn't care. If I dropped dead on the side of the highway in the middle of the night in the dark, I didn't care. I remember seeing cars occasionally going up and down the highway as I was running, and I remember seeing one, and I was running in that direction, and I was looking at the headlights, and I was thinking, I could jump in front of that thing, and all my problems would end right away. That would be the end of it. I wouldn't have to worry about any of this shit. So I wasn't exactly suicidal in the sense that I wasn't planning it out. Boy, was I thinking about it a lot. I had run out of hope. I didn't have any better options that I could think of. I had thought of everything. I had tried everything I could think of. And I mean, come on, you guys. I have ADHD. We just sit around and we think of ideas. So I had tried all sorts of wacky ideas. I tried all sorts of wacky things. I'd worked the normal jobs. I'd worked in the home for the mentally disabled, and then I worked in the nursing home. I worked as a writing tutor at my college. I worked as on an ambulance. I did jobs. It wasn't like I wasn't doing anything. It wasn't like I wasn't trying. I just needed to get out of that situation. After I became an exotic dancer, the urge to jump in front of a speeding car on the highway went away. After that, I really didn't give a single flying fuck what anybody thought. And I still don't to this day, and I don't think I ever will. When I say that becoming an exotic dancer was one of the 3 best decisions I ever made in my life, I mean it was one of the best decisions I ever made in my entire life. The other 2 being, of course, marrying my husband and having kids. Because those things are very important to me as well. Anyway, it's been well over an hour at this point, and it is about 3:40 in the morning. I might be able... Oh, okay, I'm not going to kid myself. There's no way I can take a nap. There's no way I can take a nap at this hour of the morning. But I might be able to get some research done for my next video, and that would be good, and then it will be time to get the kids up for school, and I'll sleep someday. And I'll talk to you guys later.